Call in and share your story to help other entrepreneurs. That's the Entrepreneur Opportunity Hour, every Thursday from 6 to 7 p.m. right here on the Tan Talk Radio Network.
Tampa Bay's Tan Talk. Entertaining, informative radio for the Sunshine State.
Looking for car shows? Then look no further than FLACarshows.com. On your computer or on your mobile device, FLACarshows.com is a comprehensive list of automotive events, plus videos and news articles. Whether you're looking for car shows, cruise-ins, meetups, automotive festivals, cars and coffees, or anything else relating to an internal combustion engine, then this is a site for you. Check it out online or on your phone at FLACarshows.com.
You may be owed some money. After 911 and 411, call 541. That's 727-541-1741. Call Gulfstream Motorsports for a diminished value report. Due to my 28 years experience in the auto salvage business, I'm very good with wrecks. So if your car's been involved in a wreck, call me for a diminished value report. Call 727-541-1741. You may be owed some money for the lost value of your repaired vehicle. And visit us at GulfstreamMotorsports.com.
I've made a lot of westerns in my time, but never one like the War Wagon. The War Wagon is a story about friendship, understanding.
You're worth $12,000 to me, dead,
and 100,000 alive.
The War Wagon is a story of happiness.
It offers you a little action.
Generosity.
Oh. A little fighting.
The War Wagon is a story of humility. Mine hit the ground first.
Mine was taller. In addition to Kirk Douglas, we have Howard Keel, a mighty colorful Indian, Robert Walker, an expert with high explosives, Keenan Wynn, Joanna Barnes.
What's your pleasure?
Stud.
And good old Bruce Cabot.
I want Tor Jackson dead. Keep your eyes off of my wife!
Your wife? Oh, I thought she was your daughter.
Well, she ain't! A drunk kid and a crazy old man. How the hell did
Cut it out, all of you. I didn't bring you here to be the best of friends. We're an inch away from gunning each other down, but first we have to take the War Wagon. Now, that's what this picture is all about. How a handful of men can work up the guts and ingenuity to tackle a fortress on wheels.
Horses, what are they dragging? Heavily guarded, what is that wagon? War wagon, what is it for? War wagon, how is it for? All men are fighting for us, struggling for, searching for us, striving for a wagon full of
Set the Wayback Machine.
Yes, sir, Mr. Peabody.
Hey, this is Chuck Wright. You might know me from Quiet Riot, Alice Cooper, House of Lords, and others. You're listening to Nostalgic Radio in Cars. Bang your head.
Okay, listeners, welcome. You're tuned in to Nostalgic Radio in Cars, and I'm your show host, Robert. Run your computers and Google TanTalk1340.com, and you can see me live here in the studio, struggling to get this mic adjusted. Anyway, don't forget to check out the website, GulfstreamMotorsports.com, where you can find out all about us. And if you missed any of our past shows, don't forget to check out Nostalgic Radio in Cars.com, where you can listen to all our past 600 and I lost count shows. Good evening, Bobby. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing well. How about you?
No, we're doing pretty good. Well, it's Rocktober, so we're going to continue with our tradition.
Yeah,
and
it's the second week of October, actually.
It's the second, yeah. So we have a real exciting guest on. We're going to cover, like I said, we have a real exciting guest coming on. We're going to cover musicians, I think, that play different instruments, string instruments, but people that are I don't know if is virtuoso. What exactly does that mean? But I always get that word. That's someone that's like really gifted at something. Is that the way that it is?
If you say so.
If I said, well, no, you're supposed to, you would know that stuff. Anyway, I'm just saying the guy's really good.
Talented.
Yeah, the guy's really good at the guitar. But anyway, so we got a legendary guitarist coming on our show, but probably best known in the world of jazz and jazz musicians. Okay, so and since we kind of cross all genres here a little bit, even though we're kind of rock and roll, 60s, 70s, Deep Purple kind of, Allman Brothers, Doors kind of guys, but I like to listen to all kinds of music. We even listen to classic jazz from time to time, and blues. We like blues music too. So all this is started way back years and years and years and years ago. So blues and jazz has had tremendous influence in a lot of music that we listen to today. So on that note, I think what we're going to do now, Bobby, if you want to go ahead and contribute a little bit too, and you're welcome to do that. I mean, I guess. How much blues or jazz is influenced in country music? Blues definitely, yeah. Jazz. So anyway,
jazz is more of a rock and roll influence, I think.
Yeah,
because it's always kind of it's been there, or some people just add,
Well, we are going to ask our guest tonight because he's a jazz
expert.
He's going to be the expert, yes. So, but when you listen to interviews, let's say with like even the Beatles and their Stones and Clapton and the Yardbirds and the Animals, they all were influenced by blues and jazz players. They emulated those guys, and then rock and roll just kind of evolved out of that, which is kind of cool. Anyway, hey Ed, how you doing there, buddy? You got the commander-in-chief of WTAN just, kind of second in command there, because Lola Jean, the broadcast queen, is.
Okay.
Anyway, all right. So, Bob, why don't you go ahead and fire up a commercial or two, and then we'll come back with a song, and then we'll bring our guest on. Pardon me?
Song first. We'll do the song first.
You want to do a song?
Yeah.
You want
to?
No, let's just go right to the commercial, and then we'll bring the song on.
Keep blabbing for a second.
Yep. Okay, well, you want to do blah, 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 blah. Okay, so, what's coming up this weekend? Well, let's see, this weekend is the Villages Car Show. That's this weekend. In a week or two, we have the Moonshine Festival up in Dawsonville, Georgia. We have the Fort Lauderdale Concourse. That's on the 28th. We have the Chattanooga Concourse coming up. We have Hilton Head coming up. And we have SEMA coming up the 2nd of November. So there's a lot of stuff going on. We have the Palm Beach Concourse coming on up in, I think that's end of November. A lot of car show stuff going on, a lot of motorcycle stuff going on. So we're kind of all excited about all that stuff. And then this weekend, I think it was this past weekend, this past weekend, they had the Barber Motorsports, but I think I mentioned that last week, Barber Motorsports Museum, classic stuff. Bobby, you got that thing queued up? All right, good. Or no, commercial, right? And then we're going to, okay. Hey, you're tuning into Nostalgic Radio and Cars. Bobby's going to play a commercial for us. We're going to come right back. We're going to play some music, and we're going to have a very special guest for you this evening. Looking forward to it.
You may be owed some money. After 911 and 411, call 541. That's 727-541-1741. Call Gulfstream Motorsports for a diminished value report. Due to my 28 years experience in the auto salvage business, I'm very good with wrecks. So if your car's been involved in a wreck, call me for a diminished value report. Call 727-541-1741. You may be owed some money for the lost value of your repaired vehicle. And visit us at GulfstreamMotorsports.com.
Looking for car shows? Then look no further than FLACarshows.com. On your computer or on your mobile device, FLACarshows.com is a comprehensive list of automotive events, plus videos and news articles. Whether you're looking for car shows, cruise-ins, meetups, automotive festivals, cars and coffees, or anything else relating to an internal combustion engine, then this is a site for you. Check it out online or on your phone at FLACarshows.com.
Hey now, baby, get into my big black car. Hey now, baby, get into my big black car. I want to just show you what my politics are. In the white room with black curtains near the station. Blackwood country, no good pavements, tired starlings. Silver horses ran down moonbeams in your dark eyes. Dawnlight smiles on you leaving my commitment. I want to just show you sleepy time all the time.
Hey, the Red Rocker Sammy Hagar here, and you are listening to Nostalgic Radio and Cars. Woo! Good God, woo!
Okay, we're back, and you're tuned in to Nostalgic Radio and Cars. It's time to introduce our very special guest for this evening. This gentleman is a musical composer. He is a legendary and pioneer bass player. Now, I always say bass player, bass guitar player, and he's played with some of the greats like Jack Bruce, which you just heard a little clip from, and Geddy Lee, Sammy Hagar himself. I'm delighted to welcome to the show this evening, Jeff Berlin. Jeff, how are you this evening? Hello? Did we lose you, Jeff?
Can we hear you?
Hello, Jeff, are you there?
We'll try giving him another call here.
Okay, we'll try giving him a call one more time. Anyway, yeah, so we've got Jeff Berlin coming on. Jeff has recently put out a album, and he was close friends and very much influenced by the bass playing guitar of Jack Bruce.
Let's try this.
You want to try more? All right, Jeff, are you there? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
How are you?
Well, you missed the intro, but anyway, it worked out real good. So I introduced you as the musical composer and legendary and pioneer bass guitar player who's played with the greats such as Jack Bruce and worked with Geddy Lee at Rush, and you played with Yes and Sammy Hagar and so on. And I'm delighted to have you on the show this evening.
It's a pleasure. I never really played with Jack. We jammed some.
Okay.
We worked together on Alan Holdsworth's record, and he's certainly a hero to me, that's for sure. So, yeah, and Geddy, he's a lovely man and a guy that we came up sort of in the same time. He obviously is of a superior success level, but he's one of the great legends of bass and an old friend.
So tell us how you gravitated to the bass guitar. Now, let me correct me here if I'm wrong, because a lot of musicians will say, I play bass. They don't refer to the bass as a guitar. I play rhythm, but I refer to a 6-string as a guitar, and whether it's a 4-string or 5-string. So am I correct or am I wrong, or is it kind of like however which way you perceive it? What's correct?
Sure. It's an interpretive thing. I'm a bass player. I'm an electric bass player. I'm a bass guitar player. Whatever pleases one to say. I mean, that's all appropriate. Everybody that plays bass has, I guess, their own moniker for it. But I'm a bass player. I would generally refer to myself as a bass player.
Okay. So, but it's still a guitar. So if you say bass guitar, we're still on the right level, though, right?
Sure, it's held like a guitar. It's strung sort of, and played in a horizontal manner rather than vertical. So, yeah, it's an electrified, lower frequenced guitar electric instrument. Oh, yeah, you are.
All right, so how and why did you gravitate to the bass guitar? And did you play other instruments before you gravitated to the guitar, to the bass?
Well, I was long raised as a violinist. I'm raised in Long Island, and I studied very early, 5 years old, and did it for over a decade. And when the Beatles came along, I realized that I didn't want to stay on the classical instrument. McCartney played an instrument that had the same string names as mine. I mean, a violin from low to high is G, D, A, E, and a bass from low to high is E, A, D, G. So technically, one is strung in fifths, one is strung in fourths. So I thought it might lend to an easier transformation over from violin, which is a very complicated instrument to play, to the electric bass that at least at the time appeared relatively easy to play. You just put your finger on a fret and you pluck it.
Pretty much, yeah.
So I felt that would be the nice instrument for me to go to.
So let me ask you this. Whenever I talk to a musician that plays bass, okay, they always used to say, well, you guys that play six string, you guys get rhythm or lead, you can kind of play by yourself and it sounds okay. But a bass player, we're just playing bass. Now, when I was following up a little bit on you and reading up a little bit more, you put emphasis on bass chords. But a lot of people don't think of a bass when you just think of basically single notes, but they don't realize that there actually are chords and harmonics and all this stuff. So would you care to elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I was given credit as a pioneer in one regard that I never played harmonics. That's really a Jaco Pastorius innovation. And my thing was that because I was very fascinated with chord harmony, I might be the first guy to actually orchestrate moving lines and passing tones and passing lines and moving harmony on a 4-string bass. So I did it out of interest. I was curious what the results would be. And to tell you the truth, people today have taken that and have gone way beyond what I've done. So, but yeah, I might be one of the first guys ever to do that. And I can't say that I really, at this particular juncture, want to focus that much on solo bass as much as I get older, I kind of enjoy playing sectional bass. I like being a bass player in a band. I like being a bass player in a studio. It's rarer these days because studio work is mostly a non-event, like a hired, a musician. I was just talking to Steve Lukather a little earlier, and he says he never really gets studio work anymore. So in my particular thing, I can either do my Jeff Berlin thing, which is to, continue to entertain by the music that makes me happy, and varieties of ways to look at the bass, I suppose. But as I get slightly older, and I like playing bass. It's kind of fun, and I get pretty interesting sounds out of it. And like I did on Jack, the Jack songs, and it's being in the rhythm section is kind of appealing to me. But in the early days, the hyper days, the youthful, vim and vinegar days, yeah. I was really into tearing up the bass, but I'm not quite into tearing it up like I used to.
All right, so that's another question. Like when I play six string rhythm a little bit, but I struggled because I had a guitar that had a wide neck and it kind of was uncomfortable. So then someone suggested the 4-string narrow neck, and I tell the story over and over and over. And so I just played some notes, and I was listening to one of your videos, and you were talking about how you, and it might have been Jaco Pastorius. A lot of guys, when they play bass, you play by ear. Okay, even though you know how to read notes and all the other stuff, but a lot of it's by ear, and that's kind of, you listen to a song, and then because a bass has kind of like the substance of the song a little bit, because that's what the beat that everybody follows, and that's what I did. And then I see that, so I just basically picked it like a guitar with my thumb, or I used a pick. But I see a lot of guys that kind of drape their arm and their wrist over the body of the guitar, and they play with 3 fingers. Or 4 fingers. Okay. So, is there a correct way? Is it a personal thing, or how do you explain that?
Well, there is no correct way in the regards of playing that instrument, because no so-called correct way has ever been established. If you look at all the different bass players through history, there's really quite a variety of ways to resonate those strings. But if you look at, let's say, all orchestral instruments, trumpets, trombones, bassoons, clarinets, oboes, violins, violas, cello, bass, they're very specific. they're played this way for just about the entirety of one's relationship with the instrument. But you get slap bass players today, you get 4-fingered bass players today, you get 2-fingered bass players today. There's a couple of guys that were born handicapped, without hands. And I saw a couple of guys, finding their own particular way to both, on both arms. This guy didn't have hands, and he could still press and get a note. And with the wrist portion of his arm, he could pluck it. So there's no established way. Usually, that everybody is self-taught anyway. I'm an educator. I'm pretty good at it too. But I know that when everybody buys a bass, everybody gets into it their own way. That's almost a flat fact. So everybody usually gets an instrument of any kind because they say, gosh, I love this band, I love this artist, I want to be like this person, or at least follow their influence. So everybody's self-taught in that they'll approach it how they wish. But there's a little bit of a downside to that. And the downside is that self-taught musicians really only have to rely on themselves to improve by. And what happens is that if they do that, sometimes musicians don't know enough about music in order to really eke out, let's say, musical ability or success. That generally a lot of guys that get an instrument with the best of intentions might end up struggling with basic playing skills that could have been solved in 6 months. And they sometimes continue in that particular approach. Well, it's not rare, for decades. So what I've done is I have gone online quite a bit and had suggested that if people read music or add it to their day or get a teacher to teach it to them, the notes tell you where to put the fingers on the frets, and people literally get better in 3 months. But it's kind of rare that people are willing to go that route, because there seems to be this vibe that if you play notes or read notes, it'll affect your art. But that doesn't make sense either, because people have learned how to read and write English, let's say at least your listeners, and none of them seem to be handicapped in their ability to verbally express themselves just because they were taught how to read and write properly. So it's a kind of a base myth. So I've been on a mission for quite a while to say to guys, that don't subscribe to the notion that if you actually improve in your reading and playing, which has nothing to do with art, it only has to do with bass improvement. Don't subscribe that this will in any way encumber your musicianship, because it never will. So I'm kind of a little bit in a rarefied area there, because music isn't that popular with musicians, which always sort of made me smile, the irony of that. But I've been doing traveling bass classes, mostly in Europe. They seem to be more open to musical improvement and bass improvement, let's say. In Europe, it's sort of a continental drift toward, that was a pun, a continental drift towards,
okay, I got it.
Toward musical improvement. A lot of the European nations, the younger guys, they go, yeah, so what do I practice? We'll try this, and they'll do it. And there's a lot of young generational guys that are sort of passing the American guys by. And it's kind of a choice of Americans not to learn properly, and it sort of makes it sort of a regretful choice, So there you go.
Jeff Berlin Music Group. So what does that encompass?
Well, it's my website, and it's where I sell my books. It's where I list gigs or tours. It's where I sell my latest record, Jack Songs, my dedicated record to Jack Bruce, who was a great hero to me. And that's what it is. It's a modest website, but it lays out or makes available, especially for beginners, a book that I wrote for beginners so that they could learn how to put their fingers on the neck, in a simple manner. It starts right quite simple. So it's there for download, and Jack, but that's what it is. It's that entire focus on education and musical performance and selling Jack Songs, which to me is the best record I ever did, no doubt.
So how did you come to being influenced by Jack Bruce, and then how did you come about when you first met him?
Well, in the 60s, you really had a lean choice of what was considered to be the best players around or the best bands around. And those would be Cream, the Beatles, the Stones, the Doors, Jimi Hendrix. There was the Jefferson Airplane at the time. And a lot of bands were playing, but we all knew who the best players were, we who were into music as kids. So when I heard Cream, I was floored by it because what they did entered my DNA like an arrow. It went dead into the sense of me that here were guys that literally their mission was to play higher and higher and higher every single night. And they did. And that bass player, Jack Bruce, floored everybody at that time because nobody was improvising and creating that sonic wall that he did. Gary Burton is a teacher of mine and an old friend when I went to Berkeley back in the 70s. And his bass player was Steve Swallow, who was a jazz legend. And he taught me there. And he told me that he was an upright bass player. And he told me that Gary's group, the Gary Burton Quartet, which is really a kind of light jazz fare if you want to come right down to it. But at the same time, they were masterful improvisers. But the music was light. It's vibes and acoustic bass, etc. When Steve said he saw Jack Bruce play, he said, I saw this guy stride out onto the stage. This is a quote. I never forgot it. And plug into this wall of amps and literally take the wall down. And I get it. And then he went over right away to electric bass. Steve Swallow did, which is funny because Keith Jarrett back in the 70s told me he was really ticked off at Steve for becoming an electric bass player. He never forgave him, he told me.
Wow, interesting. So having seen the interesting thing about Cream was Ginger Baker was an unbelievable drummer. Jack was an unbelievable bassist, and Eric Clapton, we all know, went on to be one of the greatest guitarists, of all times. And of course, that always raises another debate: who's the best guitarist, who's the best drummer, who's the best whatever. And I think it's a relative term because they always say, well, Jimi Hendrix or whatever would have been the best had he been around, had he had more time to experiment and so on. But I think technology changes a lot of things, and style. I mean, look at what happened to music in the 70s, the late 70s. We got into the shredding thing in the 80s and everything, and the style changed. And I'm sure the same thing happened in bass guitar too. Just like you said, back then everybody was just plucking, but now, you pioneered, chords. And there was in one of the interviews you were talking about how you used to sit there and listen to Jack Bruce when you guys were kind of jamming, and he would, I guess, play on a piano, and he would play with these chords, and he would see which chords kind of worked best together, sound better, and made the best harmony together. And the same applies to like when you play, and then he would do that on the bass guitar. So it's real fascinating when you think about it, how it evolves and how you guys get into it and passionate about it, and how the art of playing that particular instrument has basically evolved.
Well, the art evolved incredibly so. I'm still a reasonably good technical bass player. I had a hand surgery, so a year ago the bones were rubbing, and the pain is gone, but it's compromised my playing ever so slightly. I don't have the same sort of youthful ferocity that I used to have, but that opened a door for me in order to compensate and find new music and new harmony. I'm actually a better bassist for the surgery than I might have been before it. Today, bass players are astonishing. The virtuosity is astonishing. I could never duplicate or emulate or enter into their particular area of brilliance, but this makes sense. When I came along, we stood on the shoulders of Jack and Jack Cassidy and Tim Bogert, and then other guys came along and stood on ours, and then the bass instrument has become a phenomenal presentation, and people are just beyond belief. I mean, beyond belief. And so I found, though, that there's so many incredible bassists out there that how is one to individualize one's playing. And it occurred to me that the way you individualize a great player is by how you set the bass in the music. So I paid attention a lot to composition and to recording, like I did on Jack songs, to present the bass in a very rich harmonic setting, even though it's a rock setting. You know what I mean? If I didn't, I'd just sound like a pretty good bass player playing in 4/4 in E. And that's just fairly well common these days. So I elected to find new ways to present the instrument. And the way to present it, I found, is by putting it into a musical cadence and alterations and harmony and resolution that are not usual. That's real attractive to everybody. And if you do it with a rock drummer and big rock tone or something, it's really quite fascinating. So, but just as a summary to this little chat of mine here, there are bass players today that are just 10 times what I am.
Do you, when you first got started playing bass, and being that you were, fascinated with Jack Bruce, did you run out and get a Gibson EB3, or did you go to a P bass, or what type of instrument did you play?
An EB3.
Did you?
You know, I did. It was my first real. My first bass was a Hagstrom.
Oh, that's
because a guy in my town had one, and I admired him. So I went down to the guitar shop down in town and bought a Hagstrom, and the neck was bowed, which I didn't understand, and the strings were heavy, and I couldn't play, and there was no tone, and I didn't know anything about it. I had to literally find out as time went on that you could straighten a truss rod and do certain things to make your bass efficient. But my first bass was a Dinosaur. My second bass, the EB3, looked like a little bit of a what's a Hawaiian instrument they play? The ukulele, you know?
Yeah, ukulele, right.
Like a uke, tiny in my hands, and so I had to evolve to find the bass tone that I eventually found and the playing that I eventually entered into. But that's all our stories. Everybody does that. So that I kind of like the fertile soil of bad bass playing and the rich, gritty, dirty, bumpy experience of sounding bad, because if that's where we all kind of start out at. And from that awful beginning, I kind of using that word euphemistically, but from that really awful beginning, we're supposed to maybe hopefully eventually evolve to better things, to where bass or music, whatever it is, becomes a reward for us, a genuine pleasure to plug in and not struggle with the most basic tenets of music. You ever notice that kids that play violin or piano and they start as little children, these kids are playing, reasonable Schubert or Mozart or Chopin. By the time they're 8 or 9 years old, they've solved a large, great difficulty with their piano or as beginner little kids, just because they studied properly, over a little time. And that's the loss to the bass community, because few wanted to go there, when exactly the solution, like I said earlier, to their improvement lays right there, just to add to the day. You know what I mean? Don't stop jamming. Don't stop doing what you're doing. Don't avoid anything. Do everything you do. Just add 15 minutes of reading. And so I always look to the classical kids as an example that I try to share amongst a lot of adult bassists who seem not to be willing to see the logic of learning well while they're jamming and having fun too. So anyways, that went a long way around the barn too, didn't it? It was,
no, it's good.
That about the EB3 and all. So I ended up with a Court, which turned out to be the most lyrical and sweetest playing bass. It's not a famous name as regards to some of the top really modern bass instruments, but I like this bass because I think it has the best bass tone I ever heard, my Court Rhythmic. And my Mark basses, and that's it. I'm pretty traditional in sound.
That bass that you play is, did you have that built? Because it's got very nice looks. Looks like it's got some light woods and some dark tones on it. And so did you have that guitar custom made?
Well,
or the bass
actually, no. I didn't. I tend to have a moral compass that points me toward a concept that if I propose to people that they buy an instrument that I recommend, and if it's good enough for them, it ought to be good enough for me. So what you see is literally an assembly, off the assembly line bass guitar. I helped design it, but there's nothing earth-shatteringly unique in the design either. It's a 4-string passive bass, but I feel it's the best 4-string passive bass that I've ever heard or played since the famous 1962 jazz bass. It's a chord instrument, but they knew they were sort of behind. The Koreans knew they weren't in the same league, let's say, as a lot of the top American or maybe English manufacturers of basses. So these guys went all out to produce a fantastic instrument. And I played it, and I said, this is the best bass I ever played. And the facade is true. It's an interesting facade. I think, what is that, Padauk, orange Padauk, and spalted maple. It's rare that I ever used those kind of facades. I never really was excited by colorful basses. I rather was excited by basses that sound great and play great. I think that was my particular motivation. But this particular line, the Court Rhythmics, turned out to be something absolutely unique, and I'm thrilled by it. So I play an assembly line guitar. I won't ask someone to buy a bass. If I custom build a bass, I'm not sure how that's honest by asking somebody to buy the same bass, you know?
Well, what's curious is because, like, as with 6-string guitars, we play around with, like some guys like a maple neck, some people like a rosewood neck, some people like a solid body, some people like an open hollow body guitar, certain pickups, things like that. So as a bass player, and let's just say you want a guitar, you're searching for the notes, for the sound, for sustain, and obviously basses have a longer sustain than a regular 6-string. I mean, do those things come to mind to you when you're selecting an instrument, and like in this case, particularly, you said you have one off the manufacturer, or
the assembly line.
Assembly line, yeah. So maybe not you, but do other bass players get as technical with their instrument as let's say some of the guitar 6-string guys do?
I imagine they do, but the technical involvement ought to, I feel, end. I mean, it has to be a bit sort of tedious in order to have an instrument and continually tinker with it, Mm-hmm. I tend to feel that, when I played this Court, they took the designs, I shared some things and took a scope off of an old neck of mine and gave them ideas. And then this bass showed up in a box at my house. And I said, holy mackerel, they got it right out of the box. I mean, right. They got it right. Court did right away. And I said, this is a major players. These are major cats. But do other bassists tinker around? I'm going to guess not too many of them do. I mean, really, once you get an instrument, a bass guitar, the only actual things that need to be dealt with are
strings,
fret. Certainly strings usually, but the strings are choice. People will buy the strings that they like. I like slightly lighter strings. I use 40, 60, 80, 100 gauge on a 4-string. Mm-hmm. Many basses prefer 45, 65, 85, 100, 105, but I always felt that was a little too heavy for me. So I play better with the slightly, what is it, a 005 off? I don't even know. Something like that. 040 I like instead of 045. And the only thing you really have to pay attention to is the truss rod, is the neck straight. The bridge pieces, you adjust that, that maybe bridge pickup heights, mm-hmm. and essentially you intonate the bass, which anybody can do, or I could show someday, or any good luthier can show, and that's about it. It's really 3-4 little, 10 minutes on a tuner to intonate the strings to get the harmonic equal with the fretted note, and you got a great playing instrument. So I don't think. I knew Eddie Van Halen a long time ago, and I was in his living room, and I played that Frankenstein guitar, that guitar that he's famous for?
Yeah.
And I've got to tell you that I felt that this was not a comfortable guitar to play. I know he designed it and he built it and he did all these remarkable things, and no one can deny the tone that was put out. But I had a suspicion that any guitar put through the amps and the kind of way that he set up his amps would have sounded equally as good. And the only reason I thought to share that story is that today everybody makes such great instruments. It's probably not necessary to get too deep, and I'm going to swap this out for that, and I'm going to put this tube in for this, and this circuit might go there. And you only do that if you really hear in your mind a vision of an instrument sound that you can't get from the gear that you've purchased or you found, in the local stores. If the store's gear doesn't work, anybody kind of into it, and Alan Holdsworth would start to investigate and start to create something due to their own enterprise. But generally, most guitars, all they need to do, or bass players, all they need to do is get a bass, set up the neck, tweak the truss rod, possibly adjust the bridge pieces, intonate the strings, and you're done. You are done for maybe forever. I mean, I know how humid Florida can be, but because I lived there for over a quarter century, and I love Florida, man. I'd come back in a second if there was a school that would have me. I would come back trust me, I would come back in 1 second. I had a school there at the K-Pop for a number of years.
Really? Was at the Sam Ash store?
Well, in the event center, I knew the old owner, Elliot Rubinson, and if you go into the actual gardens, I had the whole top floor for 10 years.
No kidding.
Yeah, I had a music school in there, the Players School of Music.
Interesting. Well, let me ask you this. So they have the Clearwater Jazz Festival, happens to be in October of every year. Did you ever get a chance to play at any of those venues at all? Because you're kind of a jazz musician. You did.
Some years ago, I played Clearwater. I loved it. Next year, I'm touring Jack Bruce, Jack Bruce Band, and I have a jazz group that I'll be going out with, and I'll be touring a bass class. So I come back to Clearwater in a drop of a hat. My favorite spot on planet Earth.
Well, that's good to know. How about so when you tour with the Jack Bruce Band, are you going to any venues in Florida that you'll be playing at?
I would imagine if we're booked, it's all contingent upon the agents who book us and the venues that buy us. That's what tours are all about. And I know what we're going to do quite well again in Europe. I'm curious about the interest in America. You see, I'm not knocking our home country. Dun, 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 dun. I'm not knocking us. I'm saying principally that Americans seem to not be into music like they used to be, and that even they're more into music entertainment, which I think there's a difference. Music used to be and I'm being very sort of general here. I certainly can't speak for everybody, but there used to be a time, and I'm an older guy, but there used to be a time when we'd go down to the record shop and thumb through albums and see an album and buy it. I bought the first John McLaughlin Intermounting Flame record, the Mahavishnu Orchestra, because it was just in the bin. We all bought Beatles. We all bought everything that was there. Nutty groups too. Nutty bands we bought that were just out. Rhinoceros, It's a Beautiful Day. There was a psychedelic group called the Strawberry Alarm Clock. There was another band called Toe Fat. There was another band called Ultimate Spinach. I mean, what a wacky period that was. But you know what? Record companies developed artists. They were into music. They were into promotion, and they supported the arts. And today, it seems to be slightly different. Now people won't buy records or music unless they hear it first. And I got to say that made me sit up and take notice, because I used to put equate the Daniel Barenboim new version of the Ninth Symphony, recorded at Albert Hall in London. But before I buy the record from Deutsche Grammophon, I want to hear a few moments from the second movement. Then I'll decide. And it's a personal issue with me. I know it is what it is, but I felt that if people love music, you go out and support it. You know why there's no more record companies and why there's no more arts? Because people haven't unified to support the arts. They haven't unified to say we're going to buy these records. We're going to finance the music industry. When the record companies recognized that music is a product, it became as much a product as a Big Mac. And so, in a large sense, music itself is under deep threat and has been for a while in America. So, I apologize. I'm just trying to share.
No. That's good. That's good. I have two questions real quick before, and this one I'm going to tell us about fretless guitar necks. I mean, what's the real big advantage of that? That's one question, because I had somebody sent me a text on that, and tell us a little bit about fretless guitars.
Well, do you mean a fretless bass?
Yeah, fretless bass. We'll use that as an example because we're talking about basses. So, because is it all about the feel? I mean, what do you gain by going fretless?
It's a sound. It produces a sound, a very unique sort of. The notes resonate differently, where there's more of a frequency, more of a what's the word? What's that thing? What's the scope? There's a scope. Give me a second. I have to think of this. I see it in my mind. We're waves, oscilloscope kind of thing.
Okay.
And when you play an E note on a fretless bass, let's say on the A string, there's an oscillating kind of frequency. When you have a fretted bass, it doesn't do that. It just sustains it, rests against the fret, and goes da. But Jaco Pastorius pioneered fretless bass, and when he came out to demonstrating that instrument, the bass world was deeply moved by it. And until it is now a common instrument, a lot of bass players will play the bass. I personally don't. I don't own a fretless. I prefer not to play a fretless, but I recognize that other people do like it. So, but the fretless just provides a tone that a fretted bass cannot. And that's really the only difference.
Okay. Now, you had mentioned Berkeley, and the reason I'm going to go to this just for a second, because we got a couple minutes left. And but I grew up in Marin County. Okay, so that Berkeley was right across, which is basically Oakland. Okay, you're still part of the Bay Area. So when did you attend Berkeley, and were you into the music scene? If you were back in the '60s.
Now, Berkeley that I'm referring to is Berkeley in Boston.
Oh, okay.
Berkellee.
Okay.
And I attended the early '70s. And I was a part of the music scene in Boston as well as a student. And as soon as I left Berkeley, I immediately started to work as a bass player.
Okay, so Berkeley in Boston or in New England there. So is that a music school?
Yes, it is. It's one of the biggest in the world, actually. And is. I think it's changed direction in some regard. It sort of now has a focus on, let's say, the more modern approach to bass or music, in that a lot of the stuff that they teach features things that are not just music, but other approaches to bass playing. And I have an interesting story. Can I share it with you before we go, or am I talking too long?
You had 2 minutes. I always say 2 minutes.
I was very critical of Berkeley and very critical of bass teachers and very critical. And I went to therapy because it was one of the symptoms of a difficult time in me. And when I realized that how wrong I was about criticizing schools, teachers, people, I apologized. Online, I reached out and said that I'll never do this again, and will only respect people if they teach differently than I do or have a different view. I do respect that this difference exists, and I've been making the rounds trying to own my bad behavior. And as long as I have a minute left, I thought I would share it here, that I was really wrong in what I did.
Well, you kind of touched on that earlier, because I asked you about, a style, and there's, and I when I first started playing, I had like 3 or 4 different lessons, and then I just kind of like hung around with my friends, and everybody just kind of like self-taught. and we just played chords. And just like you said, we listened to the Beatles, we listened to the Beach Boys because I'm from out west, and all those bands. And then of course in the Bay Area, we had Santana was coming out, the Byrds was coming up, the Chocolate Watch Band, things like that. Those are the bands. And again, talk about goofy names, Moby Dick, another one. So but that 60s culture and that music, just like you said, I mean, it's the mindset, the music, it's just not there anymore like it used to be. And everything, with YouTube now and all the stuff on the internet, it's like I don't want to use the word desensitized, but it's like it's downplayed. It's not, it doesn't make the impact that it did, in our generation. And I'm only a few years behind you. I'm not that far. And so we grew up in the same era and influenced by the same music. And so I can totally identify with what you're saying. And so
I don't lament it because things evolve. I mean, in a sense, I lament the fact that a lot of guys are going to miss out on what might be real interesting music and real interesting and valid education and those kind of exposures. But things evolve. You can't lament the evolution of us. I mean, we're moving forward, for better, for worse. In some ways, great. Some ways, maybe not so great. So I'm just one of those older voices that says there's good ways to listen, good ways to learn, good ways to, music to regard. So I'm glad to do this.
Super. Well, Jeff, we are up against the clock. So real quick, why don't you tell everybody the best way they can find out more about you, how they can follow you on learning how to play bass and getting the new the album out, Jack Songs.
Yeah, well, Jack's songs can be found on JeffBerlinMusicGroup.com, and I have a lot of guests: Geddy Lee, Sammy Hagar, Alex Lifeson. I'm the only guy I'm fortunate. I'm very fortunate. I'm the only guy that had every Rush member as a sideman on my records. Isn't that weird?
Wow, that's cool.
So it is. It's a funny little historical statistic. But JeffBerlinMusicGroup.com, Jack Songs, that's my newest. It's quite different and quite powerful. I'm on YouTube. I'm on Facebook. Sending my love to everybody.
You're all over the place. Well, Jack, I want to thank you very much.
I'm all over the place.
That's good. That's good. That's good to know. And hey, make sure you let us know the next time you come back to Clearwater, because I'd love to have you sit in the studio with us. I think that would be a lot of fun.
It would be a pleasure. It would be.
Well, Jack, you take care. Again, thank you very much for hanging out with us here at Nostalgic Radio and Cars. I hope to touch base with you again, have you on our show when you come to town, and look forward to seeing you play in concert when you make the rounds here in the state of Florida.
Okay, Robert.
Thank you very much. Hey, I want to thank my special guest, Jeff Berlin, and one of the legendary bass guitarists and pioneer playing bass. Anyway, so hey, I'm close. Anyway, I'll get it straight. What did they say? But in the meantime, I want to thank all my listeners for tuning into Nostalgic Radio Cars. Don't forget to check us out here every Tuesday night between 7 and 8 p.m. for some of the most legendary names in music, automobiles, all kinds of cool stuff. Don't forget to check out some of the shows, check out some of the concerts. Hey, you know what? You can still buy records out there. So, and listen to some of the classic vintage music, and definitely listen to Jeff Berlin and Jack Songs. And hey, some of the original Cream. Meantime, everybody stay safe, drive carefully, and love your family.
I found an island in your arms, country in your eyes. Arms are changed, eyes are lined. Bring on through to the other side. Bring on through to the other side. Bring on through, oh yeah! Rain to sea, week to week, day to day, hour to hour, day to straight, deep and wide. Bring on through to the other side. Bring on through to the other side. Bring on through, bring on through, bring on through, bring on through. Hey, 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 hey.
WTAN, Clearwater.
FM 106.1.
WDCF, Dade City.
FM 102.3.
WZHR, Zephyrhills.
FM 104.3.
Listen.
This is CBS News on the Hour, sponsored by Liberty Mutual Insurance.
I'm Jennifer Kuiper. In Chicago, Russia fires missiles across Ukraine for the second day in a row as residents take cover. President Biden